I guess I should just come out and say it. I cheated on my wife. It's not something I'm proud of, but I'm not sitting here overwhelmed with guilt either. It happened, and I don't regret it. But let's rewind for a second, because if you saw how things went down, you'd think I was living in some messed up reality show. It wasn't always like this, though. We had what seemed like the perfect life. At least, that's what I thought. Good jobs, a nice house. For a while, things were good between us. But slowly, everything started to change, like a crack in the foundation of a house that you don't notice until the whole thing starts groaning under pressure. My wife, Lena, began pulling away. It started with small things, staying late at work or claiming to be more tired than usual. At first, I brushed it off. People get busy, right? But then, the excuses started getting more elaborate. Late nights, weekend trips for work. And suddenly, her phone was always on silent. I'm not an idiot, though. People think they can sneak things past you. But after a while, even the smallest signs add up. And Lena wasn't as clever as she thought she was. It wasn't just the phone, it was those damn trips too. Every time she'd pack for one of them, it was the same routine. Same bags, same things. Like she had it all planned out. I mean, who does that? She wasn't a neat freak, and it's not like she had some strict dress code at her job. But every single time, it was the same stuff, and it started to bug me. Why the same perfume? The same lingerie? For a business trip? I noticed. How could I not? I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something was definitely off, and it started eating at me, so I did what any guy in my situation would do. I vented to my best friend, Jacob. He's been through his own mess with relationships. His wife cheated on him a few years ago, so I figured he'd know what to do. And let me tell you, he didn't sugarcoat anything for me. Man, I found out about my ex the same way, he told me. All those late nights and business trips. You can't trust it. If you really want to know what's going on, hire someone to follow her. Get the facts before you go blowing up your whole life. Jacob was right. I couldn't confront Lena without hard proof. I wasn't about to start a fight with nothing to back it up. So, I took his advice and hired a private investigator. I found this guy, Ethan. He seemed like the real deal, someone who could get the job done without any drama. I didn't give him much info, just told him that my wife was acting suspicious and I needed answers. He didn't ask too many questions, probably because he'd seen it all before. He knew how these stories went. While Ethan was doing his thing, I started looking into things myself. Not in some creepy, obsessive way, but enough to make sure I wasn't missing anything. And man, was there a lot to find. Receipts stuffed in her purse that didn't match the places she said she'd been. Invoices for things that had nothing to do with her work. One time, I found her laptop open and saw a calendar invite for a meeting that wasn't on any of the dates she said she was traveling. It was like the universe was handing me clues on a silver platter. I began replaying our conversations, going over the past few months, trying to figure out where everything went wrong. Sure, no marriage is perfect, but this felt like more than that. It wasn't just that she was pulling away. It felt like she was running in the opposite direction, leaving me behind without a second thought. There was one night, about a month before I hired Ethan, when Lena came home late, really late. She had that look in her eyes, like she was trying too hard to act casual. She threw out some lame excuse about working late at the office, but I knew her work. She wasn't doing anything that required those extra hours. She was in project management, not in some emergency room, saving lives. I let it slide at the time, though, because I wasn't ready to admit that my wife, the woman I thought I'd spend my whole life with, might be doing things behind my back. But then came the night that changed everything. She was getting ready for another one of her trips, same bag, same routine. But this time, I couldn't sit there pretending everything was fine. The anger inside me was boiling, but I stayed calm. I knew I needed proof before I confronted her. I couldn't just accuse her without something to show for it. That's when the cracks really started to show. The way she left me hanging, her mood swings, the way she barely even acknowledged me anymore. It felt like I wasn't even there. And the worst part? I let it happen. I let her pull away without saying a word because I didn't want to face the truth. Nobody wants to admit their marriage is falling apart. But it was. And I was ready to set it all on fire when Ethan called me with the first round of results. I wasn't prepared. I thought I was, but nothing could have prepared me for what he found. I picked up the phone, expecting to hear about some guy she was seeing while she was away. Maybe someone from her office. What I didn't expect was for Ethan to tell me that Lena had another husband. Another husband? Yeah, you heard that right. Your wife has been living a double life, Ethan said, his voice steady, almost too calm for what he was about to drop on me. She's got another husband in another city. His name's Chris. They've been married for years, and they have a kid together. I nearly dropped the phone. A kid? Another family? I just sat there, stunned. My mind was racing, trying to process it. Lena, my wife, the woman I'd built my life with, had been lying to me about everything. Business trips? Bullshit. She wasn't going to work or attending meetings. She was spending weekends with her other family. The life Lena and I had built together? It was just a cover for whatever the hell was really going on behind the scenes. I can't remember much of what Ethan said after that. It all sort of blurred together. I think I even hung up on him. My world had been turned upside down. I walked around the house, my mind spinning, replaying every little detail, every memory. All those weekends she was away. The corporate retreats. The client meetings she said she had to attend. It all made sense now. Every damn lie she told me was just a way for her to run off and play house with Chris and their kid. I wasn't even angry at that point, though that came later. At first, it was like I was in shock. How the hell do you even process something like that? Your wife has another husband. It's like something out of a bad soap opera, right? But here I was, living through it. I had to see it for myself. I needed to make sure this wasn't some sick joke. So I called Ethan back, told him to dig deeper. I wanted to know everything. Where Chris lived, what he did for a living, how long this had been going on. Ethan didn't hesitate. He was good at his job. I'll give him that. While he got to work, I started tearing apart our apartment, looking for anything that could point to this other life Lena was leading. And that's when I found it. Men's clothes stuffed in the back of her closet, hidden in a suitcase she never used when she was home. Shirts, pants, even socks that didn't belong to me. It hit me like a punch to the gut. Chris's clothes. The bastard had been in my home, probably wearing those things while I was busting my ass at work. I wanted to throw them out, burn them even, but I didn't. I shoved the suitcase back into the closet and shut the door. I needed more proof before I did anything. It wasn't time to confront her. Not yet. Over the next few weeks, I started watching her more closely. Every move she made, every word she said. I don't know how I missed it before, but suddenly, everything I had ignored before became crystal clear. The way she'd get all dressed up for those trips. The phone calls she'd take in another room, speaking in hushed tones like she didn't want me to hear. I even started asking her questions about those work trips, trying to catch her off guard. Where's your trip this time? I'd say casually. Who are you going with this time? She answered without hesitation, but I could see it in her eyes. A flicker of discomfort. She had gotten too comfortable with her lies. But now I was paying attention, and every answer she gave felt like a slap in the face. Ethan sent me more photos, pictures of Lena with Chris and their kid. There they were, playing happy family at the park, looking like something straight out of a Hallmark movie. Lena was smiling, laughing, like everything was perfect, like I didn't even exist. And Chris? The guy looked like your average suburban dad. He had no clue what was going on, no idea that his perfect wife had been living a double life. I couldn't help but wonder, did he even know I existed? Did she tell him I was just some colleague she had to deal with? Or did she spin some story about how she had to travel for her job, just like she told me? I didn't know. And honestly, I didn't care about Chris or his kid or their perfect little life. What I cared about was how Lena had lied to me, how she had made me a fool. But I wasn't ready to blow up her life just yet. No, I needed more. I wanted to make sure that when I confronted her, I had everything I needed to destroy her. I wanted to watch her squirm. I wanted to see the look on her face when she realized I knew everything. That became my focus, seeing her world crash down around her, just like she'd done to mine. But just when I thought things couldn't get worse, Ethan hit me with another gut punch. As if finding out Lena had a second husband and a kid wasn't enough. Now there was Ryan, another guy. This wasn't some emotional affair, though. No, this was just pure physical. That's what stung the most, I think. She didn't even care about him. It was just about the thrill. It was like I didn't even exist in her world anymore. How many lives was this woman juggling? It was like a twisted game to her, keeping all these men balanced. And here I was, thinking we had something real. When Ethan showed me the pictures of Lena with Ryan, I just sat there staring. I felt numb, like this wasn't even happening to me. Lena was meeting Ryan in the middle of her business trips, acting like nothing was wrong. He wasn't anything special, just another businessman who was clearly used to getting his way with women. And Lena? She clearly didn't mind being one of his casual flings. No strings attached, just physical. But with Chris, she had built an entire other life. Another husband, a kid, the whole fantasy. Ryan was just a distraction, a side piece in her twisted little world. That realization snapped something inside me. It wasn't just the cheating. It was that she didn't even care who it was with. She was lying to Chris, to Ryan, to me. She was lying to everyone. And why? For the thrill of sneaking around. Ryan, the guy, had no idea. He probably thought she was just a bored housewife looking for a good time on the side. He was wrong about that, though. He was just another pawn in her game. I wasn't ready to blow things up yet. Not with Chris, not with Ryan, and certainly not with Lena. No, I wanted her to feel the full weight of her lies when I was good and ready. In the meantime, I started planning. Slowly, methodically. The first thing I needed was to feel in control again. Not just for revenge, but because I needed something back. That's where Emily came in. She'd been flirting with me for months, but I always turned her down. Not because I didn't notice, but because I was still clinging to some sense of loyalty. Even though Lena had thrown hers away, I was holding on to mine. But Emily was smart and beautiful, and she made it clear she was interested. So one day, I stopped holding back. I let her in. It started innocently enough. We went to lunch, just as colleagues. She was excited, probably thinking I had finally come to my senses. We didn't talk about Lena, though. Emily had definitely noticed things weren't great between us. That much was obvious. But the thing was, I wasn't really into Emily. Not in a way that meant anything. But she was there, and I needed an escape. It felt good to be wanted, to have someone look at me like I wasn't just the guy they tolerated. After lunch, things took a turn fast. One night after work, I invited Emily out for drinks. One drink quickly turned into two, and before I knew it, we were back at her apartment. I wish I could say it felt like a victory, like I was finally getting back at Lena in some satisfying way, but honestly, it didn't. It wasn't the release I thought it would be. It was just a distraction, but that distraction was a step towards something bigger. For a few moments, I didn't feel like the fool of a husband stuck at home while his wife was off with other men. I wasn't blind, though. I knew I couldn't get sloppy. Lena was still blissfully unaware that I knew everything. She was still carrying on with her life, pretending to be the faithful wife while sneaking around to see Ryan and Chris. The irony wasn't lost on me. Chris was probably at home, tucking their kid into bed while Lena was off in some hotel room with Ryan or whoever else, playing the same game with him. Chris had no idea. He had no clue that when Lena finished with him, she'd go right back to Chris like nothing had happened. The whole thing made me sick to my stomach, but it also kept me going. It pushed me further down this path of revenge. Ethan kept sending me more information, photos, text messages, everything I needed to end this farce. I had it all. When the time came, I knew those business trips would be my ace in the hole. Every time Lena left, she wasn't heading to some corporate retreat. She was shuttling between Chris and Ryan, spending her time bouncing from one life to another. It was almost laughable. How had she managed to keep up the lie for so long? Or maybe she didn't care. Maybe, in her mind, she was untouchable. And that's when I decided it was time to move. It started slow, subtle. I began collecting everything. Every text message, every email, every photo Ethan sent me. I wasn't going to confront her yet. Not until I had everything lined up perfectly. I wanted to be ready when I pulled the rug out from under her. But it wasn't just about the evidence. It was about how she acted. How she'd return from her trips with the same smile, acting like nothing was wrong. She'd talk about work, complain about how tired she was from traveling, all while I knew the truth. She had no idea that I was quietly gathering everything I needed to destroy her. It almost made me laugh. She had no clue. But I wasn't going to stop there. No, I wanted her to feel the full weight of what she'd done. I wanted her to understand what it had cost me. I wanted her to see the devastation she had caused when I finally let her know that I knew everything. And I wasn't going to let her off easy. Revenge doesn't happen in an instant. It's not a quick fix. It's slow, a long, drawn-out burn. and I was ready to watch Lena's world crumble bit by bit. I played it cool, let her think she was still in control while I was the one calling all the shots. Every time she packed her bags for another work trip, I knew exactly where she was going, who she was with, and what she was doing. It made my stomach turn, but I kept it together. Now it was time to flip the script. Emily was my next move. We'd already crossed a line once, and she was more than eager to take things further. To her, this was exciting, something real. To me, it was just another part of the plan. She had no idea she was just another piece in my revenge. I had her where I wanted her. We went to dinner, a fancy spot that felt a little too intimate for what it was. But I played the role. I let her talk, let her think she was getting closer to me. I smiled, nodded, asked the right questions. It was almost too easy. When she reached across the table and grabbed my hand, I didn't pull away. I couldn't. She was part of the puzzle, and I needed her. Maybe that makes me a bad guy. Maybe it makes me a piece of trash. But honestly, I didn't care. Lena had taken every ounce of decency I had left, and now I was using Emily to level the playing field. So when dinner ended, we ended up back at Emily's place. This time, I stayed longer. I let her think this was something more than it was. For a moment, I almost convinced myself it was too. But then, every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lena. I saw her with Chris, with Ryan. I saw her laughing, lying, living a life that had nothing to do with me. That reminded me of why I was doing all of this. While Emily thought we were getting closer, I was busy with something else. I spent hours copying every scrap of evidence I had. Every message, every photo, every single piece of Lena's double life. It was all sitting there on my hard drive, waiting for the moment to set it all off. But before I could make my move, I needed to see it with my own eyes. I had to witness her double life in action, feel the weight of her betrayal firsthand. So, I packed a bag, got in the car, and drove to the city where Chris lived. Ethan had given me the address already. I didn't know what I would find or how I would feel when I saw it, but I knew I had to go. It was like some sick need inside me, a part of me that had to see her lies play out in real time. The drive gave me plenty of time to think, and by the time I pulled into the quiet, suburban neighborhood, I was a wreck inside. Finding the house wasn't hard. It looked like something out of a damn postcard. Neatly trimmed lawn, cozy porch, the whole picture-perfect thing. And there she was in the middle of it all, Lena with Chris and their kid, just a few houses down, watching them from a distance, feeling like a stalker. Lena was playing the part, smiling, acting like the perfect wife, the doting mother. She kissed Chris like she actually loved him. She held their kid, a little boy who couldn't have been more than 4 or 5. And my stomach turned. It was too perfect, too normal. And all of it, a lie. A fucking lie. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, wondering how she could live like this. How she could look at Chris, look at their kid, and not feel like the biggest piece of trash on the planet. But she didn't. She was good at this. Too good. It made me sick to my core. After a while, I started taking pictures. Not because I needed more evidence, I already had that, but because I wanted to remember this moment. I wanted to remember what it looked like to see her living a life that had nothing to do with me. A life that was a lie. I sat there, watching as they played in the yard, laughing and acting like the perfect little family. And with every second, I hated it more. But I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. I stayed in that city for a couple of days, observing her, watching them. Every time she went out, I followed. She never noticed me. Why would she? In her mind, I was still hours away, sitting at home, just the clueless husband she thought I was. But I wasn't clueless anymore. I was watching everything. I saw it all. The way she smiled, how easy it was for her to slip back into this charade, pretending like nothing was wrong. One afternoon, I trailed her to a park, where she met up with Chris and their kid again. They spread out a picnic, laughing and playing, so caught up in their little world that they didn't notice me. I wanted to march over there, grab her by the arm, and expose her right in front of them. But I didn't. Not yet. I wasn't ready to make my move. That night, in the cheap hotel I was staying in, I began planning. I was going to expose her, sure, but it had to be perfect. I wasn't going to give her any room to talk her way out of this. She'd screwed me over too many times, and now it was my turn to do the same to her. I decided to start with Chris. He deserved to know who he was really married to. I'd show him everything. The pictures, the messages, the entire truth. But I wasn't stopping there. Ryan was next. Neither of them knew about the other, and they sure as hell didn't know about me. But they were about to. Lena wasn't going to have anywhere to hide when I was done. I began taking notes, piecing together a timeline of her lies, figuring out how to drop the bomb on both of them without giving her a chance to wiggle out of it. I even considered sending everything to her parents. Let them see who their perfect daughter really was. That would hurt her more than anything. By the time I headed back home, my plan was ready. Chris would be first, then Ryan, and finally everyone else. I was going to burn her life to the ground and make sure she felt every single bit of it. And I couldn't wait. After weeks of watching Lena's lies unravel in front of me, gathering every scrap of evidence, I was finally ready to tear her world apart. I'd seen enough of her bullshit. She wasn't getting away with it. Not after everything she'd put me through. First on the list was Chris. I couldn't help but feel a strange sympathy for the guy. He had no clue about the kind of woman he was married to. No idea that during her business trips, she was with me, with Ryan, and probably with a few others. He didn't deserve what was coming, but someone had to tell him. And it sure as hell wasn't going to be Lena. I drove back to the city where Chris lived, but this time, I had a plan. I called him earlier and told him we needed to meet. I didn't go into detail, just said it was about Lena. I let him think whatever he wanted. It was better that way. When I knocked on the door, Chris greeted me with a smile, completely oblivious to what was coming. "John, right? Lena's mentioned you a few times." "Come on in," he said. I almost laughed. Mention me? What had she told him? Was I just a friend? A colleague? The other guy? I shook his hand, feeling a knot in my stomach, and stepped inside. The house was cozy, warm. Exactly the kind of place you'd expect a happy family to live. Chris led me into the living room and offered me a drink, but I wasn't there for pleasantries. "Chris, I don't really know how to say this," I started, but he cut me off, chuckling. "She didn't send you here to fix the damn sink, did she?" he joked. "No," I said, my voice low. "It's about Lena." His smile faded, and he sat down, suddenly serious. I could see it in his eyes. The worry, the confusion. He knew something was wrong. I didn't waste time. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through the photos. I laid it all out. Pictures of Lena with Ryan, pictures of her with me. Messages between her and Ryan. Messages between her and me. Every lie she told. Every trip she took. Every moment of her double life. I laid it all out in front of him, and I watched as his face shifted from confusion to horror, then to total devastation. She's been married to me for years," he whispered, staring at the evidence on the screen. "We have a kid. How? How could she do this?" I didn't have an answer for him. How could anyone live like that? How could someone be so cold, so calculating, so heartless? I wanted to feel bad for him, but my anger toward Lena drowned out any sympathy I might have had. He deserved to know the truth, and now he did. Chris didn't say much after that. He just sat there, staring blankly, as if someone had just ripped his whole world away. And in a way, they had. I left him with the evidence and told him to do whatever he needed to do with it. Then I was out the door and on to the next step. Ryan. Ryan was a lot easier to deal with. I didn't care much for him. From what I could tell, he didn't care much for anything but himself. I called him to set up a meeting and told him it was urgent. We met at a restaurant, where he showed up dressed in his usual slick businessman attire, thinking this was going to be some quick chat about Lena. "Look, man," I said as soon as he sat down. "I'm just going to get straight to the point. Lena's been lying to you. She's married, and I'm not talking about just me. She's got another husband, a kid, the whole thing." Ryan blinked, then laughed like I was messing with him. "You're serious?" he asked, still thinking I was pulling his leg. "Dead serious," I said, sliding my phone across the table with the same photos and messages I'd shown Chris. "She's been playing all of us?" He stared at the phone, his face unreadable. But Ryan wasn't like Chris. He wasn't emotionally invested in this. He was a businessman used to cutting ties when things got messy. "Well, shit," he muttered, sliding the phone back to me. "I guess that's the end of that. No te harás. No anged. No questions." He just stood up, shook my hand like we just closed the deal, and walked away. Honestly, it was kind of disappointing, but at least one part of her life had crumbled. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Lena still had no idea I knew everything. And while she was busy juggling her lies, I was about to drop a bomb that would wipe her whole world out. I started by sending anonymous emails to her coworkers, each one filled with every piece of evidence I had. All the lies, all the secrets she'd tried to hide, exposed. I sent her photos, text messages, anything that would tear down the image she'd carefully crafted. Then, I moved on to our mutual friends, people who had always admired us as the perfect couple. Now they would see the truth. They all received the same email, the same dirty laundry aired out for everyone to witness. I felt like a man on a mission, ruthless and relentless. I went through every contact in my phone, reaching out to anyone I thought could help tear down her walls. At one point, I even considered sending everything to her parents. They were old school, idealistic, always thinking of Lena as the perfect daughter. If they knew the truth, it would shatter them. But as much as I wanted to destroy her completely, I couldn't bring myself to do it. Not yet. Meanwhile, Lena was starting to pick up on the tension. I wasn't exactly subtle about it. I pulled away from her, started acting colder, more distant. When she came home, I barely acknowledged her. I knew it wouldn't be long before she asked me what was going on. But she hadn't. At least not directly. Maybe she was scared of what she'd find out if she pushed me too hard. I was already preparing for the divorce. I had everything set up, legal documents, consultations with lawyers. Lena wouldn't see a dime. She'd better believe that if she thought she could just walk away unscathed, she was wrong. I even installed surveillance cameras around the house, just in case she tried to sneak anyone in while I wasn't there. Every base was covered, and by the time I was done, Lena's life was falling apart around her, and she didn't even know it. But soon enough, she would. Revenge doesn't feel like people think it will. It's not this grand, satisfying moment where everything finally makes sense. No, it's messy. It's ugly. And when the dust settles, all you're left with is emptiness. That's what I felt after everything I did to Lena. I destroyed her life, exposed her lies, and left her standing in the wreckage. But when it was all over, I didn't feel victorious. I didn't feel satisfied. I felt done. It didn't take long for everything to fall apart. Chris left her the moment he found out. He took their kid and walked out, leaving Lena in the dust without so much as a glance back. From what Ethan told me, Chris was gunning for full custody, arguing that Lena was unfit to be a parent. Honestly, who could blame him? After everything she'd done, who could trust someone like her around a child? Ryan didn't waste any time either. As soon as he found out the truth, he disappeared. Just like that. I don't think he even blinked. To him, Lena was just another woman he'd slept with, another fling that got too complicated. He washed his hands of her and moved on, leaving her high and dry. Then the rumors at work began. It didn't take long for her colleagues to get wind of what she'd been hiding. The emails I'd sent worked their magic. Behind her back, people whispered about her, questioning how she could live such a twisted, deceitful life. They lost respect for her. In fact, they didn't even want to be seen with her anymore. Within no time, she lost her job. It wasn't an outright firing, but they pushed her out, quietly nudging her toward resignation. By the end, Lena had nothing left. No husband, no lover, no job. She was completely alone. The one thing she feared the most, being alone, facing the consequences of her lies, had come true. Her perfect world was gone, crushed under the weight of her own deceit. But for me, I wasn't gloating. Sure, there was a sense of relief. Relief that I no longer had to live with her lies. I was free of her, free of the charade she had created. But there was no joy in it. My life was quieter, emptier. I wasn't sure where to go from there. There was no going back to what we had. Not after everything that had happened. And honestly, I didn't want to. Lena tried to reach out a few times. First, it was a string of emails. Long, drawn-out apologies about how she regretted everything, how sorry she was for all the pain she caused. She begged for forgiveness, promised we could fix things, rebuild what we had. But there was nothing to fix. What we had was already dead, and she was the one who had killed it. The last time she called, I answered, but I didn't let her say much. As soon as she started talking about us, I cut her off. It's better to be alone than to be with a cheater, I said, my voice flat. emotionless. I didn't feel a thing for her anymore. Not anger, not love, not even hate, just indifference. I heard the crack in her voice as I hung up the phone, but I didn't care. I couldn't. Whatever connection we once had was gone, burned away by her lies. I was done with her. After that, I decided it was time to start over. I wasn't in any rush to dive into something serious, but I kept seeing Emily. She was a good companion, steady, someone I could rely on, but I wasn't ready to jump back into anything deep. Not yet. Not after Lena. I had a hard time trusting people now, but Emily understood. She didn't push me to open up, and I appreciated that. In the meantime, I focused on myself. I quit my old job, started working on something new, something that gave me purpose again. I threw myself into my work, met new people, and formed new friendships. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of my life. I wasn't living in Lena's shadow anymore. I was just me, John, and that felt good. Lena? She wasn't doing as well. From what I heard, she was trying to put the pieces of her life back together, but it wasn't going smoothly. No one trusted her anymore. She'd burned too many bridges, lied to too many people. Every lie she'd told followed her wherever she went. Every door she tried to open was slammed shut in her face. I never saw her again after that last call. I didn't need to. She was a ghost now, a part of my past I had walked away from. And even though I didn't get the satisfaction of some grand victory, I got something better. Peace. I didn't have to wonder anymore. I didn't have to live in her lies. I was free, and that was enough.